Um, cool. Well, I'm going to share some slides. Preston and I are going to walk you guys through some tips really here. The reason for this is because like not everyone here has like formal product management experience or has worked in software before. So we thought it'd be kind of fun just to do like a really brief, like quick intro into like what PM is. Um, hopefully this will give you some insight and some prep for the hackathon this weekend. And then we'll walk through some just general tips at the end, and then we can do a quick Q&A. So I'm going to share my screen. These are actually some older slides. So yeah, becoming a PM. This is kind of a cheesy title. It's not my title. Cool. So let's see. Just to give you a brief intro into who I am, so you guys know who I am. So I'm a senior. I'm graduating here in a few weeks, and came into school like trying to find out what I wanted to do. Initially, was really sold on management consulting, and then interned at a few Utah tech companies, and like found out about product management, fell in love, and thought it was like good prep to be a founder in the future, which is like what I wanted to do long term. And so yeah, I interned at a bunch of Utah tech companies. Lucid, Brainstorm, Ivanti, Chatbooks. I don't know if you guys are familiar with any of those. Podium. And I met Chris Crittenden, probably a year and a half ago, and we put together like the pilot for Sandbox this year. And that was like specifically for PMs. We call it the PM track in the strategy major. And we've had a lot of fun building that, and essentially just decided to kind of pivot, and we just decided that going full on Startup Accelerator was the way to go. And yeah, really, it's been super fun to be a part of it. So this is me. And then this is Preston, and Preston's going to kind of help me present today. And he's also kind of in the PM track right now. So Preston, if you want to just give a brief intro, that'd be awesome too.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Preston. I got into PM and tech like a little over a year ago, thanks to Ryan and Chris. So I'm in the PM track right now, kind of the beta or the whatever you want to call it that's happening right now. And yeah, I'm just helping Chris and Ryan do what I can. And then also just another plug, if any of you are wanting to do the strategy major or the minor, I'm also helping build that out as well. So let me know, reach out. Happy to help or answer any questions you have.
Cool. So yeah, we're going to give you guys this is going to be the quickest overview of what product management is. We're going to skip a lot of things, but hopefully this will get paint a picture. Feel free to ask me questions. But essentially as a primer, you think about generating value, and I have two different brands on here, which everyone should be familiar with, both Google and Supreme. And you think about how Supreme makes—
I love you.
Maybe we just had somebody unmuted for a second there. You think about how Supreme makes money, and the way that Supreme generates value is actually through their brand, right? So they'll do these limited drops. They'll drum up a lot of interest based on kind of their branding and their marketing. And that's what generates these sales. And their products are things that they'll you think about a Supreme shirt, which I love Supreme. It's a great brand, but the shirt itself doesn't inherently have any more utility than this Nike shirt I'm wearing, or a different shirt, right? The value gets generated in the actual brand of the product and not what the product does. Now you think about software, and it's almost the inverse. You think about Google, and I don't think anyone here really cares that much about, well, maybe a little bit, but not too much about Google's brand. You're searching and you're using the product because it has utility for you. It helps you to actually search the internet. And so there's kind of this major difference in how software products are managed, because they're these utility-based things. So you're helping a user fulfill some sort of purpose, get to some sort of end goal. And so you build this product and you kind of keep iterating on it to help the user get better and better. So Google, obviously Google has built many products over the years, but those products continue to change, as opposed to releasing one product one time and just chilling on that, right? So that's just a primer on software in general, and why developing products in software is so different than it is in other industries.
Yeah, so then that leads us to what is a product manager and what does a product manager do? So this is just a pretty simple little graphic that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea. And so right here, you can see that it's the intersection between UX, tech, business, basically everything. Product manager is like the glue to the business. And your job is to make sure that your company is building that value that Ryan talked about. You're building that utility that brings the users the inherent value that they're looking for. And so, off to the right, there's a few skills needed. But kind of the product manager, how tech companies work and typically and how you guys will be is that you have teams of a product manager, a designer, and some engineers. So the product manager's job is to figure out what needs to be built and why, and what the problem is, who the customer is that you're serving. And then you go out and communicate that with your engineers and your UX and make sure that it gets built. Something that someone told me, Gentry Davies, actually, he's director of product at Divvy. He said that if your product gets delivered and brings value to the customers, then your team did a good job. If it doesn't, then it's all the product manager's fault. So it's kind of the dirty job, right? Like if you are able to build the product, then the engineers and everyone else gets credit and you don't really take the credit. But if you fail, then it's all your fault. You're kind of the glue between everything. And so it's your job to kind of intersect everything out, all of the sides of the business in order to really drive value for the business. And that's what's really exciting for the product manager is that you're the one that's really figuring out what needs to be built and why, and driving revenue and, customer acquisition for the company. I don't know if you have anything there to add, Ryan.
Yeah, I would say like summarizing, kind of what these 2 points is basically like you are responsible for defining and delivering value. If that makes sense. So it's kind of interesting because like being a product manager at like an established software company as opposed to like what you guys are going to be doing this weekend is like super different. But we're just going to walk you guys through some like basic tips of like questions that you should be asking throughout the weekend and like how you should operate as a PM. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. Preston and I kind of came up with like a few buckets and we're just going to walk you through some bullets. So this is the first thing. And we're happy to send out these slides after too. So I would say where I would start going into the hackathon and like what you guys are ultimately going to be responsible for is like, how well do you understand the user and how well do you understand the problem? And then on top of that, like what's the impact of the problem? What's the size of the opportunity? How painful is it for the users? And then why are you uniquely positioned to solve this problem? So I think all of these are questions that like, this is where I would start. If like, I'm not going to give you the prompt, but like if, let's just say like you're asked to just like go build something in, oh my gosh, what's e-commerce? I don't know, e-commerce space, right? And Chris is like, okay, like everyone like go like build some, like go find a problem in the e-commerce space and like go build something for it. And you have 36 hours. As a product manager, this is like where you would begin is like, okay, so like who's the user? What's the problem? How big is the problem? And what's the impact of that problem? How you quantify that and like how you analyze that is really up to you. There's so many different ways to approach that. I think, yeah, some good, some bad, but I think you guys can Google and get to what you want to as far as like how you want to go about that. But these are kind of key questions I would ask starting out. Anything to add there, Preston?
No, that's spot on.
Cool. Okay, this is the next one. Solution building and scoping out MVP. I'm sure many of you guys know what an MVP is, but just to brush over it again, an MVP is a minimum viable product. Sorry. It's like what product can you ship that like actually fulfills the value that the user needs? And like what's like the most minimum version of that product? Because you guys only have 36 hours and like a single engineer is like actually not that much manpower. So what you guys are going to be able to actually deliver by the end of this 36 hours is pretty small in scope. You're not really going to be able to like go build, the next Pinterest or whatever And so scoping all of your ideas on like what the solution needs to be and scoping that down into like a few key points is really like, this is what's going to separate like really awesome PMs and really awesome future PMs from like not so great PMs, especially through the hackathon. So here's some kind of key questions that we've kind of listed, like how creative is your solution? How viable is your solution? So let me just point out that this is different from like, we're not looking at the problem anymore. So like in the last slide, like you've scoped out the problem, you understand the user, you understand the problem. This is like you and your team have come together and like come up with the potential solution. So like in e-commerce, like let's say like you guys run into the problem you choose is, I don't know, it's something simple. Let's say like on Amazon, like merchant sellers are like unable to, they're not getting as many views as they would like, right? So like there are probably 50 different ways that you can go solve that problem and go build a different solution in 50 different ways, right? So this is like you and the designer together, which some of you don't have designers, so it's going to have to mostly be you. Is going to be like, you're going to be building this solution together. So ideating on like, what is this solution? How creative is it? How viable is it? One thing we're going to be looking for is like, how do you determine which features to include and which ones to leave out? And then like, which features of the ones you delivered are like the core pieces of your product, and which features are table stakes. And table stakes is just like a simple way to say like, which features are like important, but they're not focused on the core value. So you can think of things like in Google Cal, like being able to delete events is probably like a table stakes thing. I mean, like you can totally get around that and like move events around, but like it's something that you probably need in order for the product to be usable, but it's not like the core piece of the product, right? Then the fifth bullet point, like what can you actually deliver by the end of the hackathon? Part of that is going to be obviously like the capability of the engineering students that you're paired with. But a big part of that is like, how well can you scope down like what you're working on into like understandable pieces? And then lastly, like what framework did you use to prioritize features? So let's say, for example, like you decide to go build a tool for, I don't know, influencers on TikTok, right? And like you come up with like, okay, our product like helps TikTokers like monetize their following. And like feature one is like, we're going to build a link that like links that like it like takes people in the audience like directly to this influencer store. Or we're going to build like a storefront for these like influencers. Or we're going to build like payments, like point of sale systems online for these influencers. So there are 3 different features, right? And like ultimately it's up to you to decide like which one of these is the most important thing and like how did I get to that answer. So there are a lot of frameworks you can use. I'm going to just expert tip here. You can find a lot of resources online about how to prioritize features. This is something I would probably recommend coming up with the framework before you go into Thursday. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't want to dive into like the many different frameworks there are, but yeah, this is going to be a large part. And I think this is actually going to be one of the more difficult pieces of the hackathon, is because not every team has a designer. And so being able to scope all of your solution down into like really digestible features and things you can actually ship in 36 hours is going to be really important and will set you apart. I know I spit out a ton of jargon on this slide. Does anyone have any questions here? Okay.
Could you go a little deeper on table stakes?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is so in any product, like you've got like any number of features, right? Like I use this TikTok example, and like we can talk maybe about like Instagram. Let's talk about Instagram. Everyone uses Instagram.
Question.
Core value things for Instagram is like you got to be able to follow people. You got to be able to post things. You got to be able to like send DMs. Table stakes is stuff that's like it doesn't really make a huge difference. Like it's not really like the core piece of the product, but like the product actually doesn't work unless you have that, right? So like I think of things like, man, what's a good example on Instagram? Yeah, like giving people notifications or like having private accounts. That's a good example, right? Like you're not going to start building Instagram and start by building private accounts. It may be a table stakes like in the future. Oh man, I'm doing a bad job at explaining this. Preston, you want to jump in here? Anything you want to add?
I consider table stakes something that like you have to have in the product, but it's like not bringing core value. So for example, like Instagram has to have a login function, right? Or a log out function. Like if there's no login function Instagram, there is no Instagram, right? But like really it's not bringing any real core value to the user. It's just something that you have to have in order for Instagram to work.
Or like
That makes a lot of sense.
changing a profile. No, that's probably not even. I would say log in, log out is like table stakes, right? So like what you need to have a good balance of like how do you ship something that like actually has core, like is focused on the core value, but like you can actually like use and demo. Does that make sense, Nathan?
Yeah, it does. It's almost like you have balls that are the core values, and then you have to make sure you have kind of lines to connect them so that you can actually use the core value.
Yes.
Yep.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thanks for diving into that.
Yeah, 100%. Any other questions on this slide, guys? Okay, hopefully you guys understand. I don't know if we're just like totally speaking and you guys don't get what's going on here. Sorry for all the jargon. I'm trying to pull back a little bit. And then this is probably, so this is another thing that you guys will be responsible for as PMs, but validation. Actually, Preston, I think this is your slide. You want to dive into this?
Yeah, so this is like, you've come up with your solution, right? Now, have you tested it with people? Like, it's one thing to come up with a solution and just go ahead and build it. But what, as a product manager, you need to go figure out if that solution works for your users. So have you tested it with users? Have you talked to other people about it? Have you gotten feedback? And more importantly, who are those people, right? If you're building TikTok, you're not going to be interviewing 90-year-olds, right? You need to make sure you're talking to the right people. And like, also, like, are you just building something cool that you thought of with your team that's like, oh, that would be fun? Or are you actually solving the key pain? And then this doesn't really go with validation, but I threw in here at the end that's super important. Like, what are you measuring for? Like, what are you building for? Before you start building something, you should already know, okay, this is what we're going to accomplish. Like, before you even start building, like, for example, like TikTok, right? You know, you want to know what you're measuring. They're going to be measuring videos created as well as videos shared, maybe. I don't know. But you got to be able to decide what metrics you're going to measure, like why you're building this thing before you even start. I would get that figured out. Are there any questions here? Pretty simple, but again, we do use a lot of jargon. So if you don't know what we're talking about, please ask.
Yeah, I have a question. So for the prompt, are we going to be given a problem, or will we need to identify a problem that we'll have to like validate the problem and validate our solution, if that makes sense?
Yeah, this is a good question. So what I'll say is like, you're going to be given like a space and like, you may be given like a specific problem. So like, if that's the case, Carolyn, I think, and your question is probably touching on this, like, if you're given a specific problem, you probably don't need to go validate the actual problem. You should definitely understand it. But like the validation you will have to do is like the solution validation. Does that make sense? So like when you come up with an idea to solve a specific problem, you'll want to go validate that. So I'll just plus one onto that and add a little bit. Like, I think this is like the biggest thing that one of the biggest like indicators or things that Chris is going to care about. You can tell in his email to you guys about like, oh, if you're a PM, you're going to want to get out of the building. And he like linked this YouTube video that I'm sure many of you guys have watched. Yeah, this separates like really awesome PMs from like not so great PMs is like, and I will tell you, I think he is expecting you to like go and like do some sort of solution validation in like this short amount of time you have. So however you want to approach that, I would maybe look up online like what the best ways are to do that, but that is definitely something I would be thinking about.
Awesome, thank you.
That's a great question. Any other questions about solution validation? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So just as far as like the way we present, and I mean, if this gives away too much, you don't have to answer, but as far as the way we're presenting kind of our solution, everything like that, are we going to be asked to present a lot of validation? Is that something we should focus on, kind of geared towards presenting at the end as well?
I'll give my sense and then Ryan can chime in too. Yes, definitely. Like your presentation shouldn't only be validation, but it should be a very big piece of what you've done, right? So you should be able to show like who you talk to, how many people you talk to, maybe like why you talk to them, and then the key insights that you gained from talking to them, right? Because that's really why you go out and do validation. It's not so that you can just build whatever these people tell you to build. As the PM, it's your job to figure out the key insights from these interviews that you've done, to then put it in, implement it into your product. But like your whole presentation isn't just validation, right? But it's a very big piece to what you're presenting, along with like the solution itself.
Yeah, so I'll just add on top of that, like what you need to understand is like from a judging perspective, like from Chris's eyes, like let's say he gives you all the same problem and you all go and build 50 different products that solve the same problem. Like for the best way he's like, for him, like if I'm Chris and like I'm looking at 50 different projects, like the ones that are going to stand out to me the most are the ones that are like backed by data a little bit, right? Like, oh, this team like went and talked to like 20 people and like these 20 people said like, 18 of them said they would like really love this thing or whatever. Like, I would say like how you choose, like you guys have 4 minutes. We're going to jump into this in a sec, but you have 4 minutes. Like, I don't know if you guys recognize like how little that is. That's like literally no time to present your final thing. Like it's close to nothing. You're going to have like 3 slides or however you choose to present. So, whatever you do present, like just make sure like it is the most important things. I would say validation, like at least touching on that, like fits into like what I would consider the most important stuff for like your final like presentation or whatever.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Anyone else? Okay, this next slide, some things that we've already touched on, but like what's going to really help you stand out, as Ryan kind of already mentioned, like viability, creativity, and then traction. What we mean by traction is like how far along were you able to like get in the development process? With your engineers, like how much of the product have you actually built already? And so really the key insights here, besides the feasibility and viability that Ryan talked about, like would be how are you different? Like what's your competitive advantage and what's your unique insight into this problem? Like what do you know or what are you solving that nobody else is? And then really highlighting that that's going to really help you stand out along with everything else that we've mentioned. This last slide is just general tips. So as the PM, like you should not just go figure out what you're building, like do the problem or solution validation and then pass it off to your engineer and be like, okay, cool. Like good luck building this. I'm going to go home. Right. Like it's a very iterative process. And you should be working closely with your engineer and designer if you have one, as well as you should, if you can, talk to experts in the space that have experience with whatever problem you're solving. And then I would practice your presentation and what you're going to say. Like Ryan said, 4 minutes is like no time. So as much as like prioritizing what you are going to build, you should also prioritize what you're going to present. But yeah, Ryan, anything else?
Yeah, I would just say like, I don't know how many of you guys have done like case competitions, but like this is not a case competition. Like you are not being judged based on like your strategic thinking. I think that's part of it, but like you actually need to like go deliver something in 36 hours. And like that is like a very minuscule amount of time to like go actually like do some like, you know, talk to some users and then like come up with like an idea for a solution, like build a prototype, like test that prototype, and then like actually like have some code finished. So I would say like probably the most massive lift for everyone here, just judging off the fact that like we don't have a ton of designers participating and there are some teams double stacked with PMs, like you need a prototype and like you're gonna have to design those screens somehow. So I would get familiar with Figma. Figma is like a free online prototyping tool. It's really simple. It's really, really easy. Just watch a 10-minute video and like get familiar with how it works. Because some of you guys are gonna have to be designers, well, just by nature of wearing many hats. And so I personally think that that's probably where the biggest time sink is gonna come in. Like building good screens and building good like mock-ups takes like a good designer like a week. And so being able to like do this really fast in like 36 hours and like having no prior experience in product design, I would just get a little bit familiar there. And I mean, I would say across the board, like I think like I'm not trying to scare you, like everybody else is coming from the same place, and like we're not expecting like, you know, anyone to like ship Instagram or like Twitter in like 36 hours. But I would say like this is probably going to give you a leg up, is like if you can get a handle on like how to design a few things and like how to put your solution into a prototype, like it'll go a long way. And then
Yeah,
just, oh,
I was gonna say the last piece that I would add to like general tips and what's going to help is like we're like evaluating your whole process, right? Like Chris wants to know like how you got to where your final solution and why. Like we're not just showing up at the end for your presentation and looking at it. Like that's like a very small piece is the final presentation of what you're being evaluated on. Like Ryan, Chris, and I are going to be going throughout the hackathon, like jumping into your room, seeing what you're doing, like why you're doing it and how. And so it's like, it's this whole entire process, right? It's not just focused on that last bit. So Chris really cares a lot about like your thinking and how you're getting to where you're getting to and why, and then being able to back that up.
yeah. I'm going to add two more things here. One is like at hackathons at other schools, like, yeah, I just wouldn't expect, like Preston said, I just want to double down on this. Like, don't just come up with an idea and hand it off to your engineer and go home. Like, there's too much work to be done for like the PM side, even though it feels kind of like ephemeral and like you kind of got to make it up. Like, I think you guys should, like the PM especially should probably expect to be doing the majority of everything else that isn't coding. The second thing I would say is like having beautiful slides is like cool, but like I think shipping something real is probably cooler. So like I would say like if you can go an extra mile and like make a website that will take like 1 hour, or like generate some beta signups like of like potential users who could, and like through like some sort of Google form, or like just doing all these like extra things that like are not just like making pretty slides, like it will go a super long way. So I will kind of close out general tips there. And then I think that that's all we came prepared with, but like happy to answer any questions for the next few minutes if you guys have any. I know we just like dumped so much on you guys, but feel free to fire away with anything you have.
I have a question. Are we required to use Figma, or can we use other like framing and prototyping programs like Adobe XD?
Yeah, no, you're totally, you can use whatever. Figma is just like what I prefer, but I think you can use whatever you want if you have experience with other products.
Oh, I have a question. So the product prompt is all about like college experience, or it can be anything, like not only school.
Yeah, I'm not sorry. Can you ask your question one more time?
Like the product prompt, like the scope we're doing, it's like only about like college experience, or it can be anything else.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't want to give away the prompt, but I would expect it to just be anything. Like, it could be about climate change and environmentalism. It could be about e-commerce. It could be about this. Yeah, it probably would just be like a specific space. So I would just be ready for, yeah, whatever gets thrown at you. And it is going to be the same prompt for everyone.
How many teams are participating?
25.
I have a question. So because we only have 4 minutes to present, can we have an appendix with like a lot more info explaining our process so that you guys can look at it after?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely recommend. Yeah, like I would keep your like actual presentation pretty simple, but like if you really want to get into like some dense stuff, like yeah, I would fill that appendix. So the answer is yes, something I encourage. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I actually had one more question. So those of us who don't have a UX designer on our team, just so that I like understand exactly what we're supposed to do, we're basically going to be taking on the UX role. Is that right? So we're just going to make mock-ups and, you know, show what it would look like and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yep. So however you want to approach that. It's a massive lift and a big ask, but we think it's the answer is yes. So
Great. Thank you.
Do you guys know how many product managers you're looking to accept for fall?
yeah, so Chris's answer to this is that he'll take as many students as he thinks are amazing. And so that's not like limited. I would say you can expect it to be pretty competitive though. I don't think it's not like everyone participating in the hackathon is going to get into Sandbox next year. So it will be pretty competitive, but I would just focus on being amazing, and I don't think you have anything to worry about. You're not necessarily competing with like everybody else, right? It's just like if you are, I don't want to say worthy, but like if you're good enough, then like you'll get accepted regardless of how many people are already in the program.
After the hackathon, kind of when can we expect an answer?
Yeah, that's a good question. That I think so. It gets interesting because like, so one thing to understand is like, and maybe this will take a little bit of pressure off, but like, you're not going to be accepted into Sandbox based on where your team places in the hackathon. This is more just to like get a sense of where everyone's at. Meaning like a team could place first and like it doesn't mean everyone from that team is getting into Sandbox, or a team could place dead last and it doesn't mean everyone on that team is like automatically rejected. It's just a data point. You can probably expect some like follow-up interviews and calls. Not everybody, but just people who Chris needs like maybe some additional data points on. So it's hard to give it like a real answer on this question, but I would say like within a few weeks, probably, hopefully. But I don't want to say the interview process, but the process will continue like after the hackathon, if that makes sense. Like this is not the end of like deciding who gets into Sandbox next year.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah.
Ryan, is our final deliverable just the slide deck, or should it also be our code or maybe a video of our product?
Yeah, I would say it's really up to you, right? Like, so I would say like, if this is me, I would prepare a few slides. I would probably do a demo. Whether you want to pre-record that or do that live is up to you. Where you're actually like clicking through like the code or like the interface or the prototype, whatever it is. And like, if you build a website, if it is a website, I don't know. If you build a website, like maybe you would just show that. Like, it's really up to you. But like, yeah, if it were me, I would include like a real demo, and then some slides, and then like whatever peripheral, yeah, whatever else you want to include there.
Okay, sounds great.
So yeah, I hope the focus is like, again, like on actual delivery and like where you get to, and not like pretty slides.
Hey Ryan, really quick. I think Chris and I will prefer real demo versus video.
Okay, cool.
It's Alan, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for joining, Alan. So yeah, real demo then. We're doing a real demo. Just hope your Band-Aid code will work.
How do we know who's on our team?
That's a good question. Does nobody know who's on their team right now? Was there
Emails went out like an hour ago.
Okay, cool. Yeah, email. Check your email.
If you didn't get an email, then please reach out and we'll get that figured out. It should have come from Emmett, right?
Cool, guys. Any other questions that we can answer?
I have two more. So for those of us teams that have two product managers, how do you recommend balancing the work and the responsibilities between the two of them? Should one of us kind of take a more user experience role, or what do you think?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I would say like find strengths and play off of those, right? Like who actually is better at like making mockups? Okay, that person should probably be the one like making those mockups, right? Or like who, I don't know. I think it's a lot of give and take, but yeah, just divide and conquer based on strengths is like my recommendation. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Preston.
No, I mean, it's a tricky problem to solve, but I think that's also going to be of interest to Chris and those of us evaluating, is how you manage that yourself and like figure it out, because it's not easy.
Do you have a second question?
Yeah, maybe this shows how little I know about UX design, but how does Figma play into the demo? Are those separate, or do you somehow attach the code to the prototype that you make?
Yeah, so separate. I think the way I would think about this is, and like obviously you guys are constrained on time, right? So like I'm just gonna play out like, let's say you had infinite time. Then like you would find out what the problem is, talk to some users, understand the problem really well. Then like you would start like making some mock-ups or like come up with like a solution. And like you would start building like these individual screens, connect a prototype, go show that to people, like let them click through it and like get a sense of like how people are interacting with this thing, make some changes based on, you know, this feedback that you're getting. And then you kind of like, we'll hand this off to the engineers and they'll like go build this thing, right? Unfortunately, like it's not like you have like 36 hours and then your engineer after that has like 36 hours, right? Like you're doing this all together. And so like, I think figuring out like this cadence of like how you're going to do things like chronologically is going to be a challenge, but yeah, excited to see how you guys tackle that.
Hypothetically, say you get started making the product, you feel like you have a good idea, and late in the process, you through continuing to do validation to find out that your idea is garbage and that it's not good. Is it good to be honest and say this is why this idea doesn't work, or is the best thing to do to go back and reset?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to send it back to you and just say like, whatever you think is the best way to approach that question in this hackathon, like in a vacuum, right? Like I'm not talking about the real world. I'm just talking about this hackathon. Like, let's say you have 1 hour left and you're like, crap, this idea sucks. Like, what do we do? Like, I'm just going to say like, whatever you think you like, the best way you can like show Chris that like you are a competent product manager is like, yeah, that's like what you should do. So if it were me, I would probably like show all the work we did and be like, okay, this is why this isn't viable. And like, here are some other places that we were planning to go look. But like we ran out of time.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and like that probably will happen to some of you. So that's like that's not uncommon. Like if that happens to you, don't think that you failed. Like that's very normal.
Actually, it might be a good indicator that like you're paying attention to like what users tell you and like looking for those insights, right? So may actually be a good signal rather than a bad one. But yeah.
This might be a really dumb question, but is there a dress code for the competition?
No. I think you should just wear whatever.
So at the end, like only one person can give the 4 minutes presentation, right? Or it depends.
I think the ask is everyone on the team is doing that together. I'm not sure. I would expect more clarity on that from Chris this weekend, but I would expect that everyone would be presenting.
It should be a team presentation.
Cool. Thanks, Alan.
So are we meeting somewhere all together, or are we just going straight to our assigned room with our teams?
Oh, Alan, do you know the answer to this?
Yeah, you guys will go into your room to work with your team, and when it's presentation, you guys will come to the room where me and Chris at, and just come in one by one, like go onto the stage, go back to your room. But everything will be shared over Zoom, so you can see each other's presentation.
So yeah, probably show up to your room like 15 minutes early, and there may be some sort of like Zoom kickoff or something of the sort, but I would just go to your room. But you'll present in person to Alan and Chris.
This may be a dumb question, but are masks required the entire time?
That's a good question. One that I don't know the answer to. I believe you're supposed to wear masks within the Tanner building. So I think so. But also understanding 36 hours is a long time to wear a mask. Yeah, I think so. I'll just say that. I think so.